Patterson. I'm in the Phoenix area. I have been appraising for almost 20 years.
Awesome, thank you. And Kelsey?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Randall. I'm an associate appraiser in Western Kentucky. I've been a trainee for about 2 years now.
Awesome. In full disclosure, Kelsey is one of my favorite persons on the planet. And Mr. Humphreys?
I am his other favorite person on the planet. I'm Hal Humphreys. I'm with Appraiser Learning, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Thank you, Hal. Hal is, I'm excited to have everybody here today for a lot of reasons. I've known everybody on this call for quite some time, Jeff and Brooke and Hal, probably for the better part of a decade. And so, and all of you know, and at least the panelists know how much I love ANSI. I've been teaching it for that long, as has Hal. I am a home measurement specialist. It is a certification that you can obtain if you so desire. And I enjoy teaching the class. I think since the announcement, Hal, one of the reasons why I invited Brian and or you on, not only are you on our Class Act panel, but also you're an instructor like me, and you've been inundated with requests to teach since December 15th. It's made for a busy winter. So I do have a few slides I want to share, and I've got some slides that we can go back and forth with, but I want to have some general discussions. The first one, though, is if you have not attended one of our digital appraisal demos, please do it. The times are here. They're every Tuesday, Thursday in the afternoon, Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. There's the QR codes. You have access to those. It is the technology that we invested in that does generate detailed floor plans, 3D twins of the property, etc. And so I'm really excited to announce also that through our acquisition of DataMaster, they will have a portal up, I believe, by the end of this month for appraisers to order those digital appraisals, or at least the floor plans and digital twin of the property for assignments outside of the scope environment, or the class ecosystem, if you will. So finally, one other addition is if you do not already have a copy of ANSI, you should actually purchase one. So Brooke was asking a question. She went right to the page as we stated it. You really should have a copy, whether it's a physical copy on your desk, you print it, etc., or it's a digital copy on your desktop. You should have as a point of reference and something to go to when you do have a specific question and or dealing with a client, including AMCs like class valuations. So those are my slides at this moment. I'm gonna stop sharing somehow, I think I can, and just go to a general conversation with the team. All of you have been adjusting to the ANSI standards. I recognize that it's only a Fannie Mae requirement, and it's not Freddie Mac or FHA or VA. But I would imagine your clients collectively are asking for the standard regardless. Is that fair? Hal is nodding.
Yeah, it's not only is it fair, I think it's, Freddie may not be requiring ANSI, but they're not going to be mad at you if you use it.
No, are they not going to be mad, Hal? I don't think they would get in the way for the simple reason that there are some states that actually require adherence to these standards. Jeff, Brooke, what are you hearing? Are all of your clients asking? Are they changing their engagement letters? What are they doing? You're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry about the noise. Yeah, I've gotten several, emails basically saying there needs to be ANSI language. I mean, the VA but that language has been on my reports since I took the course from you probably 8 years ago. So nothing changed on my end, but yeah, I am getting some emails and a lot of correspondence.
Whether they've asked for it or not, I'm just doing all ANSI just to be consistent and not trip myself up from going back and forth.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think for some of us, we do that in general, right, with our templates and or our common responses that we build out for different circumstances, for sure. Kelsey, I know that you're working as an associate and a trainee with your supervisor. You're getting pretty close to your license or certification, though, I would imagine. And so you're out doing solo inspections as well. You are, I would guess, measuring per ANSI standard regardless of the property?
Yes, even before it was adopted, Brian, my supervisor, he always adhered to ANSI, and we've put some language in the reports, regardless if it's Fannie Mae. And we actually got a revision back on one for FHA the other day wanting the ANSI declaration, and we just went ahead and included it. So we've just been putting it in all of our reports.
Makes a lot of sense. I can tell you from my position, we have had lenders across the board ask some questions. One is, how are you going to QC to ensure that the appraisers are meeting the ANSI standard? Are the appraisers going to provide some sort of statement? What does your engagement letter look like? All of those questions and concerns are being raised. And then in addition to that, we do have some other clients that are outside of the forward model. So think reverse, we're the largest appraisal management company servicing the reverse industry, and they follow FHA standards. Well, many of those lenders, while they have not adopted ANSI as a whole, they've adopted elements of, not completely necessary, but they have. And they have done so for several reasons. And one is to gain some consistency. Hale, I know that while you're teaching the class, Appraiser eLearning did the ANSI Roadshow. And in part of that, I think you invited Fannie Mae to participate in those meetings. I know that I shared one such interview with Lyle Radke, and I share it with the classes that I teach. But I think for me, what was interesting is the number of appraisals, or really the genesis behind the adoption, but the issues that they're seeing, and that is 20%. So 1 out of every 5 appraisals where they have duplicate appraisals, meaning you and I appraise the same property. We are measuring the property at a difference of greater than 10%. That's a lot, right? So I live in a 2,500 square foot house. You're going to tell me that one of us is measuring it at 2250 or 2750, right? Essentially. And then more concerning, and I say that as an appraiser from Arizona, Brooke, you'll appreciate this, is 40% of appraisers are simply using the square footage provided by the assessor. Now that's a round number. Sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's not. My issue is in Arizona, they're very rarely correct. And then Hale, I think we did a survey through the Institute of Housing Technology some years ago, asking agents, would they rely on the assessor's record for their own personal residence? And 92% of agents said no. 92% said no, they would not rely on it. However, they will use it for advertising purposes on their listings that they sell. So those are some concerning numbers for Fannie, and I think you hear that from them on your interviews. Yes, Hale?
Yeah, absolutely. And to just quickly go back to your first question, as far as clients requesting ANSI, every one of my clients has requested ANSI included in their reports. Now, a lot of times we don't know if it's going to Freddie or Fannie or whatever. If it's going to VA or FHA, of course we know. But all the clients are saying we want all of our reports done to ANSI standards for that very reason, just for consistency. The tax assessor doesn't have to be right. They're not required to be right. They're required to be fair. I have had countless, immeasurable instances where a real estate agent will use tax records if it's the highest square footage. If it's not, they won't use it. And they'll say, oh, that's not reliable, but if it's the highest square footage, they're going to use it. So, ANSI does bring some consistency to the game. And I know a lot of people have had a lot of heartburn about a bunch of small little points of ANSI. But at the end of the day, if we all turn to the same page in the hymnal, we're going to be singing the same song. And that's it should be replicable. It should be, if I go out and measure it, John should be able to go out and come up real close to what I came up with. We're not going to be spot on 100%, like to the minuscule rounded whole foot every time, but we should be real close.
Should be real close. So you brought up a great one. So, and that is a lot of heartburn, Hale, your words, and I get it. There's some anxiety around it. It's change. So from Jeff or Brooke, Kelsey, what are the areas of concerns that you're hearing either from your peers or that you've had either in relation to the adoption since April 1st? And what areas, quite frankly, do you not like? Do you think create problems or challenges for you that you weren't totally prepared for? And Jeff, you got to remove yourself from mute. That's all.
There we go. For me, the biggest issue is a home on a hill where part of it's, a good portion of it's below grade. And I haven't actually had any since it was mandatory to use ANSI. So I haven't, but I know that I'll have to put it in the below grade. And the biggest issue is I'm not sure how the adjustments will work. I'm not sure how my software will adjust if I have to do it with a calculator, or I haven't been there yet.
So before Kelsey and Brooke go, so let's talk about that. So it's above and below grade, and Hale, I think will agree with me. That is probably one of the most contentious areas when we're teaching the course. In fact, Hamp Thomas, who wrote a course, he does an intro for the classes for me. It's a video intro, and he puts on a hockey helmet or a batter's helmet kind of thing and says this is his uniform for teaching the course. And the reason is appraisers get so excited about some of the changes, or at least the methods in which the residences are measured. So above and below grade, it's interesting because the form today references above grade GLA, gross living area, and then basement, and below grade finish or below grade rooms. I like to make that distinction or separation, above grade versus below grade, and as opposed to using the term basement, which may have its own connotation or definition for people. And basement means a whole lot of different things to a whole lot of different people. Brooke and I live in the Phoenix area. When we see a basement, very rarely are they not finished to the nines, just like they would be as a above grade living space. I grew up in Michigan, where we have Michigan basements. That's a rock wall with dirt floor. Very, very different basement. Doesn't mean that there's not finished ones or unfinished in either geographic area. So when I make the distinction between above grade and below grade versus basement, I can have that conversation with a consumer, with an agent, with whomever's involved in the transaction, to simply state, I recognize the space. It's just below grade, right? Now, adjustments are a whole different thing, Jeff. So we see a couple of things with regards to above and below grade today early on. Number one is appraisers are sometimes making offsetting adjustments. So they're comparing the house. Let's just use 2,000 square feet, 1,000 above grade, 1,000 below grade. They're comparing the house to other 2,000 square foot properties that share the same size and utility. Now, the comparable may not have any space below grade, and they're making offsetting adjustments. Okay, that's one way to do it. The other is to make no adjustments and comment. Regardless, you're going to have to comment on why you did what you did. And so the other 2 points that I would share with everybody on this call is there seems to be some, I don't know if misunderstanding is the word, but appraisers over time have somehow drawn the conclusion that if it's not included in the GLA, it somehow doesn't contribute to value. Hal, keep me honest here, in your classes, is this like an overarching theme for appraisers? Like, oh my God, if I don't include it in the GLA, it has no value, and the consumer is gonna have my hide for that.
Yeah, that happens across the board on any of the changes that ANSI is talking about. So, the third or second floor slope ceiling, people are like, I'm losing square footage. You're not losing anything. The basement, here's the thing, in Nashville, if I call somebody's finished below grade area a basement, they want to fight me, because in Nashville, a basement is that thing that has a door in the kitchen with the stairs that have like a 17-inch rise and a 4-inch run. And if you try to walk down them, you're going to die. And it's a concrete pad with a 3-foot knee wall and then dirt over to the foundation walls. That's a basement. And if you call somebody's, finished below grade area basement, they get really mad about that. The key is for appraisers, you have to tell people, look, I'm not saying it doesn't have utility. I'm not saying it doesn't have value. What I'm saying is ANSI requires me to report it as below grade. That's it. It can have the equivalent value as the main floor or the second floor or any other floor in the building. The other thing real quick that I've noticed a lot of people are having some confusion about is grade.
Me too.
I've had countless people say, well, if it's below road grade, but it's got a crawl space underneath it, I'm still going to call it above grade finished area. It's like, guys, grade is the earth against the finished exterior wall of the house. That's what the grade is. So don't get confused about what grade is. ANSI even handily has on page 1 a definition of grade that says the ground level at the perimeter of the exterior finished surface area of a house. I mean, it's pretty simple. So if any part of the house is below grade, you're going to call it below grade. The problem is, John, the biggest problem is Fannie Mae developed this neat little form that we all use called the 1004, and it does not say above grade and below grade. It says above grade finished area and basement finished and unfinished, and that's confusing.
So good news is change is on the way. So the new forms, as I understand it, whenever they're introduced, I hear anywhere from 2 to 5 years, will make the distinction between above and below grade, and basement will be a different line item. So the last thing that I would say is there is an exception. So me personally, I have no issues following ANSI and reporting 0 square feet above grade. I can tell you that. I've got an uncle's house, lives on a lake, pull in from the road. He pulls into his garage and then goes down a finished staircase to the lower level, which is considered entirely below grade, although it's only 1 wall, right? However, if you are going to do that 0 square feet above grade, you are going to have to move everything above and use the exception to say that you couldn't measure per ANSI standard. It will cause a UCDP failure in delivery with 0 square feet. So keep that in mind. There is an illustration here. This is really about slope ceilings, but you can see on the bottom illustration, there's a dotted line showing grade. This entry level is entirely below grade. You can see it's really about the foundation. And as long as dirt is at or above the foundation on any one wall, then the entire level is considered below grade. So, Brooke or Kelsey, what about you? What are you hearing? What are your challenges? So that's grade. My guess is there are a couple other things that people are not understanding correctly, or maybe you have issues with.
One thing we see here in Owensboro a lot is like bonus rooms not being included in GLA, whether it be that it's under 7 feet or it doesn't have a permanent heat source. And so that's on those, most of our comps have the similar bonus room. So ours, we usually just include like a line item that says finished attic. And whether we make the adjustment for square footage at the same as we did the GLA or whatever, it just tends to raise some flags while we have the large adjustments with our clients, and we just have to really explain it in that commentary. Because for our comps, we don't know without measuring it and only using assessor records if it's GLA or if it's similar finished attic space.
Yes, hold on one second. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen. So once again, now you're talking about, Kelsey, a bonus room, or in Owensboro, Kentucky, it would be for you probably like a bungalow. There's some sort of second story room. In addition, we're talking about grade. And so Michael Harding asks a really good question. What if you have a 2-level home where the lower level is partially below grade, and then the upper level doesn't have a ceiling height of 50% at 7 feet or higher? Talk about an anomaly. You're always going to have one of these exceptions to the rule where just everything could just be wrong. But if one level is partially below grade, then it's entirely below grade. You have a second level that doesn't meet the requirements for ANSI. So now it leaves some discretion up to you how you want to measure that space, by the way. But nonetheless, you have a conundrum there. So UCDP is not going to allow you to report 0 square feet on the GLA line. So you are going to exercise the exception that Fannie is allowing, and that is identified in their fact sheet. Now, if we go to Kelsey's scenario, and let's just assume there's 2 levels. The first level is 1,000 square feet. There's a second level, and it has either slope ceilings, or there's an area. And Brian, your supervisor in Owensboro, Kentucky, Mr. Brian Reynolds, he actually has a house, and he'll tell the story. He bought a house for an investment purpose, and the upper level has 2 rooms in it. I think it also has a bathroom, but it has 2 rooms in it. The ceiling is not quite 7 feet tall. In fact, he says it's about 6'10". He's tried everything. He removed the carpeting and the padding, and he even tried sanding the floors a little bit, and he still can't get it quite to 7 feet. So he calls it a room for the little people, the little kids. They can go up there and sleep, right? And so does that mean that it doesn't serve for the utility and the square footage? It actually does, right? The market recognizes that as 2 bedrooms and a bath. They're going to recognize the square footage, and there is value to that. What's interesting here is Fannie Mae has made a decision when that happens. So that 2 bedroom and 1 bath in the square footage is going to be included on a separate line item. So use one of the 3 line items below. So that's going to be bonus room. I would give a denote of the square footage for that space. But because the room count is above grade, Fannie Mae is asking you to include that 2 bedroom and 1 bath in the room count above grade. So you're only going to report 1,000 square feet above grade. That's the first floor. On a separate line item, you're going to report the, let's call it 500 square feet above grade finished living area. And then the room count is going to be, let's call it 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, 2 bedrooms on each level. So that's an interesting one. And it's not something we would generally teach in the ANSI course, Hale. Probably not the way we would have ever viewed it, but that is the way Fannie Mae is asking the appraisers to report that space. Now, Michael asked one other question, and when you're referring to a 2-level home where 1 level is partially below grade, we have all kinds of different configurations of homes. We have split levels. They can be a bi-level, a tri-level, even a quad level. Again, any level that's below grade, technically, Jeff mentioned it before, on a hillside, you technically have a level below grade. So Brooke, how about you?
I think that the biggest challenge is going to be figuring out what the difference is per ANSI finished area and what we're considering gross living area. Comparing it to your comparables, because let's take an area that you and I both know well, John, Maryville, where what might be considered gross living area is still marketable square feet in that market area, because that's what that market area accepts. And being able to gather all of that data support your adjustments, and then translate it back into the report so that your reader understands it and doesn't ask you for a bunch of revision requests. And I see that the definition for finished area per ANSI is an enclosed area in a house that is suitable for year-round use based upon its geographic region, embodying walls, floors, and ceilings that are similar to the rest of the house. But it doesn't really say how it got suitable. So we have a lot of wall AC units in the Phoenix area. And wall AC units are considered personal property. So they're not technically heated and cooled by a permanent source.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that is, there were 7 changes to the current ANSI, and one of them was related to that definition, Brooke, and it's because they used the word geographic region for a reason. There are, I think it's about 7 counties in Southern Florida. So I think the Keys up to Miami, and then the state of Hawaii. They do not have a requirement for heat. You can actually find the counties, and if you search for FHA heating requirements by state, right? And they'll have those identified there. So ANSI had to recognize that, if you're a house in one of these areas, you don't have a habitable heat source, then obviously you have square footage, right? We've got to be able to include it. So they used the term geographic region. I personally love the definition in the handbook 4000.1 that talks about what is a habitable space and talks about a permanent heat source. It doesn't really talk about cooling. I see Darren is asking kind of the same question, if you will, about finished rooms above grade with no vents, heating, and air, for example. And so look, I want to go back to the original statement you made, and that is in comparison to the comparables. That has always been a challenge that we've had. Me following the ANSI standard, I've always had that challenge from the day I started doing it, right? My measurements are different than those that are reported in public records of the MLS system. I have to use my best judgment, understand what is credible or not, and then use that opportunity through the verification process to ask the questions from the market participants involved in that transaction to try to understand the property better. Maybe there's some good photos and descriptors, but generally speaking, that's where I'm going to be. Then if the market participants tell me that that space is still included, people would use that, great. I would then leverage the same language in the handbook 4000.1 that says, if you're in doubt, separate it out, right? So if it's a bonus room, a conversion, an addition, and I'm just not sure, I can separate it out and then still recognize its contributory value in whatever way, shape, or form. Darren also asked a question. This is probably number 2. It's about stairways. Darren, this is a great question because when I teach the class, and Hamp knows this because you've taught, Hale knows this because you've taught Hamp's course before as well, right? It just so happens that we discuss staircases right after lunch. And so, Hale, you don't know this, but I start the survey that Hale does at the end of class, Hamp does at the end of class. I do it at the beginning. And one of the questions that I'm asking, or the questions that I'm asking, are how many follow an ANSI standard? How many of you are familiar with the standard? How many of you copy of the standard, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these hands are up. And then I get to staircases and people say, wait a minute, that's not ANSI standard. No, it is. You just haven't been measuring per ANSI standard. So ANSI does not remove a staircase from any level, right? So I like to think of it as a staircase on a hinge, and you simply raise it up from the level in which it descends. And that is included in that space. In any space below it is considered square footage on that level. I know it seems weird because you have some staircases with really what is nothing underneath of it, but there would be if it was raised. So I do have a screen that I want to share too, because it is change number 2 in the new version of ANSI, and we call it the stairs to nowhere. And so, Hal, do you want to take this?
I want to say something before you get to this.
Perfect.
Okay. So go ahead and take that off the screen for a second if you can.
I can.
Here's the thing. People are, when we talk about heartburn, pain points with ANSI, stairs for some reason are causing a lot of people a lot of heartburn. Okay. The easiest way I've found to make sense of it is forget about the stairs. Don't worry about the stairs. Measure the outside of the ground floor the same way you always would have. That's the square footage of the ground floor. Okay. Then measure the outside of the second floor. That's the square footage of the second floor. Period. End of sentence. Now, if you have a vaulted area that goes up next to a stairwell or whatever, you take that out. Simple. Don't worry about the stairs, except for this example that John's about to show.
So, Hal, you're talking about open to below areas. We all know we should pull those out. It's one of the reasons, by the way, why assessors are rarely correct. Is they're not generally going inside the house. And so they don't know how to carve out areas in the garage, for example, that are included there and not in the main structure. They don't know about contiguous areas and whether or not they're finished or not. And they don't know about open to below areas as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. So it is called the stairs to nowhere. So a couple of things. One is you're on a first floor going to an unfinished basement. Remember that staircase goes up to the first floor. Therefore, we have, as Hale pointed out, your exterior measurements for that floor. There are going to be instances, and they don't generally reside in Arizona, although at least not in the Phoenix market. Think of you have an attic space that you walk up the stairs. Now, FHA several years ago said we got to do more than just a head and shoulders inspection. Believe it or not, the genesis behind that requirement was because of finished staircases that appraisers were walking up and they were stopping at their head and shoulders and they were looking around. And FHA is like, well, wait a minute, it had some sort of decking, some sort of finished flooring. It might not have been a finished attic, but you could have gone up there. And so that is the reason why they modified their language in the handbook 4000.1. But stairs to nowhere means you have an attic space and a finished staircase that's going up to the attic. Now, the door should be at the upper end of the staircase. That way the finished staircase is heated and cooled like the rest of the house. When that staircase is raised, it is now a third floor in this instance. We have a first floor at 1,200 square feet, a second floor at 1,200 square feet, and we have this 30 square feet, I would imagine 10 by 3, right? Staircase that is now hinged up to the third floor. So you have 30 square feet of finished GLA on the third floor. And we call that the stairs to nowhere. I don't know who came up with that name, but it stuck with me. So we're gonna roll with it. All right. What other questions or concerns that are coming up? I do want to share with you a few thoughts from clients as well. But what are you all doing about a statement, and what are your clients besides class asking for as it relates to statements or declarations?
Hey, John, really quick, if you don't mind, one other question on staircases. We just had someone ask about spiral staircases. I don't know if that has any difference with anything that you guys just went through.
Spiral staircases are not discussed in ANSI. And so it really is the discretion of the appraiser. And I think we treat it differently. I look at it as, do I have safe passage to the second level or the level that it's being used at? And then what is that space? So I come to mind, there's a townhouse development close by. They all have this loft. I don't know what the loft was before, but there's a spiral staircase that goes to the loft. not going to use it for much of anything. The ceiling height is rather low to begin with. And so I'm not sure that I would include that space anyways, but I do believe that you get different responses. So I'm going to look at Hale for a second. Spiral staircases, how do you handle them?
Number one, it doesn't come up all that often. Okay, so I want to just remind everybody that the one-off examples, we need to address them occasionally, but it doesn't happen that often. Number two, my thought on spiral staircases is if they are safe, meet building codes, whatever, to get to the second floor, they have the same utilities of the staircase, I'm going to treat it the same way I would normal stairs. I'm going to measure the outside of the ground floor. I'm not even going to think about the stairs. I'm measure the upstairs, whatever. If there's a vaulted area, I'm going to take that out. I might add, that circle area that the staircase occupies to the second floor square footage. I mean, here's the thing for spiral staircases, it's not going to be that much difference. You're looking at maybe what, 9, 10, 12 square feet.
Very minor. Very minor.
There's a question about stairs on the first floor descending to an unfinished basement. And the answer to your question, I don't see who answered, Powers Vander Mendel. The answer to your question is on page 2 of the ANSI document. And when I say page 2, it's just after the definitions, page 2. No, that's wrong. Just bear with me. Page 4 of the document, where it talks about stairs descending to an unfinished basement are not, that square footage counts on the first floor, regardless of the finish of the basement and regardless of the finish of the stairs.
Yeah. And I answered the question, just unfortunately only to Nick.
I think I pushed it out to everyone. So, and John, we had a couple other above or below grade questions, but I didn't know if you wanted to save those to the end and get to everything else first, or if you wanted me to escalate those right now to address. It's up to you. I don't know how much more.
Well, let's go ahead and try to address them.
Sure. So first question is, what about a 2-family unit that is situated on a hill whereby 1 unit is below grade?
Well, ANSI doesn't apply to 2 to 4 family properties. So that's easy.
Okay. This one I think we may have answered already, but what about a split level home where there is no dirt touching wall?
A split level home where there's no dirt touching any one wall. I'm trying to imagine what that looks like. We had a property that we were investigating, and I actually involved Brian Reynolds and I think Hale, you may have even seen the pictures. There's dirt touching one of the walls. There has to be somewhere in a split level. It's the nature of the structure.
I can almost imagine, and again, we're talking about one-off situations. These don't happen that often, number one. Number two, when they do happen, you do have to stop and kind of think your way through it. But like, if you've got a house that has a sloping front yard, and then the front door is, you got to walk up a flight of stairs to the front door, and then it's a split level. So none of it has earth on the exterior walls. What you have is first level, second level, just like you would. It's the same measurements you would do for any other house. Now, the difference between a level is if a finished floor area is 2 feet separated from another finished floor area, you have 2 levels, right? If it's 3 feet difference, it's two levels. So keep in mind, my grandfather's house, when I grew up, there was a den off the back of the house. It was, 4 steps down to the den. It was added onto the house. That would be considered a different level because it's 3 feet, between those spaces. But if everything is above grade, you would report it as above grade finished square footage, and however many levels you have, you report that many levels.
And the last question, I think, just a quick yes or no one from Daniel. I believe you just said to not to report the GLA as 0, even if the main floor is partially below grade. Is that correct? I do run into that in my area. And if that is the case, just include the main level as GLA and include commentary.
Yes, you should really access the ANSI fact sheet from Fannie Mae. They have a code GSX-0001 or something like that that you're going to have to use. And the only reason why that would be in play is UCDP will not accept 0 square feet below or above grade, right? So now whether that changes in the future, I do not know, but that is one of the reasons for their exception code. That another reason for an exception code would be a berm home or something like that you just can't measure. So keep that in mind. All right, going back to Brooke and Kelsey, Jeff, statements. Are your clients asking for a specific statement? How are you letting your clients know that you've measured per ANSI?
Well, in
Go ahead,
my
Kelsey.
here, we usually just put a statement in the report somewhere, usually like the use PAP identification addendum, and it just says measurements in accordance to ANSI Z765, and that usually suffices. We have had some clients that want more specific declarations, like more specific as far as the exact square footage of that house, but for the most part, we just put that generic statement.
So ANSI requires a statement of finished square footage. Now, there's an argument that in my report, I've got the finished square footage in there, so I've already made that statement. To be safe and to make it crystal clear, because we all know these AMCs don't read these things. To make it crystal clear, what I'm doing is I'm saying, you know, I've measured the house in accordance with ANSI standards. This is my statement of finished square footage. The house has X number of finished square feet above grade, X number of finished square feet below grade. And then if I have, and I've also rounded to the nearest whole foot. And then that's it. That's my statement. Unless I have one of the declarations that I have to deal with involving I didn't inspect the interior, or I couldn't measure the house, whatever, then you have to put a declaration saying what you didn't do. One of the funny things is, like, square footage that does not meet the ANSI standard for finished area. The standard actually says finished area that don't meet the criteria of calculated square footage, such as those areas not connected to the house or underneath the 5-foot mark on the second floor, whatever, those cannot be included in your statement of finished square footage, but they may be listed elsewhere. To keep my statement simple, I've just got above grade finished square footage, below grade finished square footage. I rounded like this, done.
And Hale, I think what you just said when you started the conversation is 100% correct. And I believe Fannie Mae recognized that, right? And that is, your report already has a statement of square footage. It's on page 1, and then it's followed in the grid, right? That's your statement of square footage. We know what the size is. The challenge for the lenders is, how do they ensure that the appraiser is adhering to? And they ask me that, how is class valuation going to ensure the appraiser measuring per ANSI? It's very hard if you're not in the field and measuring the property to do just that. We can make certain assumptions. We can ask questions. For example, if all of your walls are rounded to the whole foot, it probably didn't measure per ANSI standard, right? If 100% of them. If you've removed the staircase from any one level, I know you didn't really measure per ANSI standard. If you're including space, as Hale just mentioned, that is non-contiguous. So think a finished level above a detached garage. And yes, folks, I see these kinds of things included in the GLA. No, that should be separate from. So how will lenders know that appraisers use the ANSI standard? They're looking for, as Kelsey pointed out, a simple statement. I mentioned before, here's the exception, GXX001. You're going to use that with additional comments if you have to exercise the exception. Hale referenced 3 declarations. Those are on page 4, I believe, or page 3. They're on page 3. In those declarations, there is some confusion, and Fannie is going to alter their ANSI fact sheet here in the very near future. I know this because I've heard through the grapevine. Question number 9 is going to be modified. Question number 11 regarding condominiums is going to be modified. So what does that mean? It just means, look, the selling guide is policy that requires that you follow ANSI. So the expectation is you as an appraiser, you're completing an assignment that you have measured per ANSI standard, enough said. If the client wants an overlay and they're going to expect some sort of statement, then stating you measure per ANSI, as Kelsey pointed out, that's a beautiful way to do it. Perfect. What they're going to do is make sure that people know that the declarations are not required. And so we already have lenders saying, well, we don't see one of the 3 declarations included in the report. That's because the appraiser didn't exercise one of the exceptions, as Hale pointed out. So you should see that, and that'll bring some relief to the appraisers, because the underwriters that are asking the questions are going to be better informed. And by the way, they are being informed. I've personally taught ANSI for non-appraisers to, I don't know, 400 underwriters online one day. So hopefully we can do more of those. Hale, I think you have appraiser e-learning has a suite also intended for bankers. So Fannie Mae has made it very clear. They expect the underwriters, their sellers, to be more informed and understand. So hopefully that's helpful for you. If you do have to use the declaration, Hale, you pointed out there's 3. So the first one is, if you what?
First one is if you don't do an interior inspection, you don't go inside the house. So you cannot speak to vaulted areas, stuff like that, or unfinished areas underneath the slope ceiling. You just put a declaration saying, you know, these are based on measured dimensions only and may include unfinished areas, openings and floors not associated with the stairs or openings, blah, blah, blah. ANSI has a sample declaration in there. I have had a number of people say, well, is that copyrighted? Can I put that in a report? I mean, look, if you're that worried about copyright, copy word for word, put it in quotes, cite the source, move on. If you can't get inside the house, use declaration 1. If you're doing plant.
Hold on one second. So 1, Hale, I'm going to ask you to go through each of them, right? But the first one, so everybody's aware, I don't know how many appraisers are ever going to come across that not for Fannie Mae. Why? Because we have to inspect the interior of the house. It's really that simple, right? So would we ever realistically use declaration number 1? I think not. Might you for other assignments? Yeah, you could, right? Especially if you're going to continue to adhere to ANSI standards. Declaration number 2.
Declaration 2 is plans and specs. I mean, it's literally saying I use plans and specs, plan dimensions. The finished product may vary from what was provided to me. This is what I've got. You're just telling your client how you came up with the square footage.
Yeah, so that's pretty simple, right? That's new construction. If you do that, I know there are some appraisers that don't touch new construction. I get it. But if you are doing new construction, you're working off of blueprints, plan specs, whatever, you're going to take those measurements and replicate them to ANSI standards. And then the third one, Hale?
The third one is, for instance, you cannot get, you're in Lake Tahoe and the house is built on the side of a cliff. And if you try to take a tape measure or a laser measure out to that outside wall looking over the lake, you're going to die. That's the declaration used for that. I had to guesstimate. I measured the front wall. I'm making an assumption that the back wall is the same. The corners appear to be square, whatever. But if you can't get to it, you may have to use declaration 3.
So I think that's really interesting. I had a conversation with Lyle Radke from Fannie Mae, and I gave him that example. And I said there would be no expectation for me as an appraiser to carry my rappelling gear to measure a house like that, Hale, and Lyle said he would. So interestingly enough there. So those are the 3 declarations, and and the reasons and rationale for using them. So if you do come across those, please make sure that you're using a declaration. Robert Smith asks, I've seen conflicting info on handling finished area rooms under stairs. For example, a half bathroom under the stairs from the first floor to the second floor. The bathroom should be counted in the room count, but not as part of the GLA. No, it should be included in the GLA. Remember, those stairs are going up to the second level, and the space below it is considered square footage on the floor in which it sits. So, Robert, you would include that in the square footage. So I think challenges that we're seeing from clients and underwriters right now are really just trying to understand the measurements, particularly, yes, when there is discrepancy between public records and the appraiser. So some sort of indication that you recognize those exist. I know appraisers get caught up in that. It's been easy for me over the last decade or two to simply state, I am so sorry, but I'm measuring per a standard. And if you don't like the standard, I can't help you, but I remind them that I'm recognizing whatever space it is that they're speaking of. So Brooke, that carport conversion to some sort of bonus room, I don't know what it contributes to value, but I'll figure it out in the market and make sure that they understand that that contributes to value. It just might not contribute at the same rate as the primary dwelling. For Kelsey, if it's at split level, you know what, maybe it's below grade, but it contributes at the same rate as the primary dwelling. And as long as they recognize that I'm giving it the contributory value, whether it's separate is insignificant, right? They can certainly combine it for a listing. They can combine it for any number of reasons if that's what they choose to do. But your directive is to measure per ANSI standard. So I know we're running close on time, so we have about 7 minutes. Do you, Kelsey, Brooke, Jeff, Hale, you're an expert in this already. Do the three of you have questions that are burning inside of you about ANSI that maybe you're hearing online or from friends that maybe we can answer and they're just not being asked here?
I have stopped going online. Robert Smith, your question real quick, your question about the underneath the stairs on page 5 of ANSI, first paragraph on the right-hand side of the page, it discusses the fact that areas beneath stairs are included in the finished square footage regardless of the distance between the stairs and the floor below or the degree of finish of that area. There is no ceiling height requirement for under stairs. They don't care how finished it is. It counts as square footage. You know, I think we've covered the questions that I've seen, and we've gotten a gazillion questions emailed to us, asked on Facebook, stuff like that. We've covered the main pain points. You know, Kelsey, what are you guys seeing up there in Owensboro?
To the staircases. That's your question?
No, just burning questions that we may not have covered here today.
Well, going back to the bonus room, I hate to keep going back to that, but if you're not going to include it in GLA, say it's less than 7 feet, we still do, but do you still go to the 5-foot mark and then measure that way?
So that's a really great question, Kelsey, because Brian and I had this discussion with, I think, Hale, Hamp, Thomas, and I believe also some folks at Fannie Mae collectively on a call regarding his property where it doesn't meet. And so there is this interest in driving consistency. We've said that multiple times here. That's the reason for the adoption of ANSI. However, there are going to be circumstances where we are not going to be consistent. And that is a great example. I think we were split. Some folks that were on that call said, well, I'm still going to measure per ANSI standard to the 5-foot mark. And others said, well, since it doesn't meet ANSI standards, I'm just going to go to the knee wall. That could result in square footage differences between the two appraisers for sure, right? But I think those are, we've mentioned it in several scenarios already, isolated incidents for sure. So let me just share with you a couple screens, last ones before we go. There are some folks that I think a lot like background checks, measurement standards, like why are we doing this? We've always done it this way, etc. Keep in mind, there are some states that require it. Here's the Commonwealth of Kentucky. They actually have it in statute. You see here in section 2, the standard for the calculation of reporting above grade square footage and below grade square footage will meet, or the appraiser will adhere to the ANSI standard. Interestingly enough, I co-presented with Larry Disney, the former executive director for Kentucky, and also Peter Christensen from LIA on this topic to the regulators. Should home measurements be regulated? That was, I think, 5 years ago. So the states have the chance then, they opted not to. And then finally, the last screen I'm going to share with you is I get appraisers asking, I think, Brooke, it's very similar to what you were talking about before about comparables and the way it's listed in the MLS. And I think, Hal, you started off the conversation when we did almost an hour ago about somebody's got to get started somewhere, right? The assessors certainly aren't doing it. And so as an appraiser, we do have the opportunity to influence change, right? And here is just an example from Kelsey's area, her multiple listing service. And they actually state in the MLS agreement that use of the expression square feet per PDA in Owensboro is their assessor. And so Jeff and Brooke, I know in our MLS systems, MetroList and Flex MLS, we see square footage and then /assessor or some source, wherever they got it from. But use of the expression square feet per PDA or any other similar language based on the assessor's calculations relating to square footage is prohibited. So if you want to influence change and you want to get the comparables to look more like your subject property, then start demanding from your MLS provider, who you pay your dues to as well, to require that the properties are measured per ANSI standard. And by the way, states like North Carolina has a similar statute, but it is for the real estate salespersons, not the appraisers. And in North Carolina, home measurement services are quite popular. So you can imagine the agents aren't all that interested in measuring the properties themselves, but they know the state requires that the property is measured per ANSI, like Owensboro, Kentucky. And so there are folks, appraisers in the Owensboro area that are measuring properties for listings. And so go to your MLS boards, go to your real estate boards, communicate with agents. Let's get everybody on the same page. It's really not that complicated. You heard a couple of questions. It's been very easy for me. And I think from any kind of, whether it's pushback from a lender or a homeowner or it's in litigation, following the standard has been key for me. And it really protects me more than not. So any last departing thoughts from the four of you? And again, Hal and Kelsey, thank you for jumping in last minute. We appreciate you.
I think a lot of appraisers are overanalyzing it a little bit too much and need to just look at what their market reacts to and figure out how to take what ANSI requires and what the market reacts to and put it in the report.
John, I'm sorry, did I step on you, bro?
That's okay.
John,
Buyers and sellers, they don't know what ANSI is. And so they're not reacting to ANSI standards. They're reacting to what they see as the utility of the home, where it is and what it's for. And it's our job to follow that standard now and measure the market.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, at the end of the day, Fannie Mae, Lyle Radke said this probably 500,000 times in the past 3 months. We're not telling you how to appraise real estate. We're not telling you how to appraise the property. We're telling you we want it reported, square footage reported this way. That's all they're asking for. One of the things that I find interesting is, Fannie Mae has made it very clear that less than 2% of the properties in the country are going to be impacted by this in some kind of strange way. I get that. That's not that big a number, 2%. But if you do the math, that's a lot of houses. And I get that there are appraisers up in the Northeast and Nashville, around the country, up in Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. They're going to have some difficult things to deal with because of this ANSI standard. A-frames, the third floor, thing that doesn't meet the standards. We get it. We all get it. And at the end of the day, you got to report it the way ANSI says it, and then analyze the property the way you analyze the property.
I think it would be helpful for those areas that have those typical outliers to type up their statements so that they don't confuse themselves as they're working through the report. So if you know what ANSI already requires going in, and you can take it apart into your comments that you've already set up for that particular outlier, it should be pretty easy peasy.
Yeah.
I like your thoughts and your attitude there, Brooke, for sure. Kelsey, Jeff, anything to share with the folks before we leave?
Yeah, for me, I haven't really had any issues. Maybe that's just luck, but I haven't had any pushback. I've been doing this for a while, but I realized that not everybody has, and so I haven't had anybody, no conditions, no questions, anything. So it's knock on wood, but it's good.
Perfect. Well, listen, everyone, really appreciate you taking the time out. Remember to purchase a copy of the ANSI standard. If you have not taken a measurement course, there are multiple course providers, Appraiser e-learning being one of them, McKissick being another, Appraisal Institute, etc. They're all providing these classes. And my understanding even today is as soon as one is being opened up, they are selling out quickly. So if you've never taken one, trust me, please do it. I teach the 7-hour class, and Brooke, you've heard me say this before, maybe even Jeff. I always get super excited when people are coming into the classroom for a variety of reasons. One is it's just exciting to see people in their face, right? But the second is there's always one or two that walk right past me. They don't make eye contact. And the appraiser simply says under their breath, I don't know what we're going to do here for 7 hours, but I need the CE. If that's your attitude and you're just going for the CE, I get it. I can tell each and every one of you, those are the same individuals that are holding me after class while the property is asking me to get out. Like, hey, you were only supposed to be here until 5. Like, you've got to vacate our building. So there is a lot to learn. There are nuances, and there's always these one-offs. So with that being said, thank you so much. Please make sure you attend our next class at Council. Hale, Brooke, Kelsey, and Jeff, thank you so much for making the time with us today. We appreciate each and every one of you.